1. So let me lay down some groundwork first. I live in a neighborhood that is ripe for the haunting. There are old abandoned coal mines below us, and there was a sanitarium at the top of the hill, and TB huts that likely have sat where our houses do now. Mix in a little Wild West and Native American lore, and you see what I mean. My dad bought this house when I was 5, one other owner ever. I bought it from him about 5 years ago. I have a handful of kids, but this story really only involves my younger sons. When we moved in, the older kids complained that they felt funny, even watched. They are on the second story. I assured them that all would be okay, and after a week or two, they felt better about it. Had a few roommates rent the spare room in the basement, but all short-lived and told me the house gave them the creeps when I wasn't home. I thought that a silly excuse, but okay, whatever, bye. Well, one day my little guys, maybe 6 and 7 at the time, older one is on the autism spectrum, but verbal, maybe a maturity of a 4-year-old, just won't go to bed. They are up and running to the bathroom, needing 1,000,000 cups of water, yelling, fighting with each other. Being hellions, I go to the bottom of the stairs and I call them out, and I'm telling them this is not okay and they need to knock it off. Not yelling, but in that no-nonsense mom voice. The older of the two's eyes got big and he says, "Okay, I'm going to bed right now." He grabs his little brother and they run to their beds. No more bad behavior. I hear the older one shush the younger one a time or two, and then they are asleep. I enjoy the rest of the night and go to bed. Some time passes and the boys are going to bed so much better than they used to. I ask them about why, after that really bad night, they are doing so much better with it, and how proud of them I am for their good behavior. And the younger one has little to say. This is my conversation with the older one. He says, "Do you remember that night when we were being bad and you yelled at us to stop?" "Yep, son, that's what I meant. That night was bad, but you've been good since." And then he says, "Well, we went to bed because the man behind you told us we better." "The man, do you mean Daddy?" "Daddy wasn't home that night. He had a work emergency." "No, Mommy. The man, real tall, dark, no eyes." "No eyes?" "Yes, no eyes, and he had a mouth, but he can't talk with it. He told us we better listen and go to bed, so we did." What the heck do you even say to that? So apparently my resident spooky thing that has never made me feel uncomfortable, maybe because he has known me nearly all my life, that any roommate I have had has been practically chased off by, laid down the law that night, and has my parental back. 2. So I live in a 2-story apartment building on the 2nd story with my mom and our cat. I have lived here for over 5 years, I'm 18 now, and I've got a handful of experiences that I've had here because of that. I've always known that there have been things that live here with me, and I've never really been scared of it. I can tell whatever lives with me isn't out to cause me or my family any harm, and is probably just trying to live beside us, in harmony. It's also totally possible that they don't even realize we're here. That being said, when one of my best friend's boyfriend visited my apartment and immediately said, "Oh, this place is haunted," I replied, "Yeah, I know." One of the experiences that terrified me the most was when I was 13 and Snapchatting a friend late at night. And in one of my pictures was an incredibly detailed but semi-transparent face right next to mine. This was way back before Snapchat introduced filters and facial detection. This was also before memories. So, when I saved this picture, it only saved to my iPod Touch's photos, not online. 2 of my biggest regrets are that I saved it instead of screenshotting the photo, because when I saved it, the quality was so bad that you couldn't really see the face at all, and I don't have that picture anymore. I really wish I still had that picture, because since then it's been easy to sweep this memory into the category of loose childhood memories that I'm not quite sure happened. I can remember this moment so clearly, though, and I remember how terrified I was. I couldn't sleep after that. That was the biggest experience I had, but I don't really go looking for them. A more recent thing that still continues to this day, somewhat periodically, are the footsteps. I'll hear footsteps above me stomping around in the middle of the night. Remember that I live on the top floor of the building, and every time our apartment does roof work it's during the day so as not to wake anyone up, and they warn us at least a few days ahead of time. It's not as frequent anymore, but a year or two ago it got to the point where I was hearing them every night for a few minutes at a time, all around the exact same time, 11 to midnight-ish. Similarly, the most frequent thing is the noises from next door. It's a very normal thing for us to hear banging and loud voices from the other side of the wall when we go to the bathroom, and it always startles my friends the first time they visit. That's not that unusual by itself, since it's an apartment building and you always hear the other people stomping around. The odd thing is that I've been hearing a baby crying on the other side of the wall since we moved in 5 years ago. The same baby, it really sounds like. Plus, I've never ever seen the people in that apartment actually leave their apartment in the 5 years I've been here. That one is a lot easier to write off because it could simply be that they have a lot of babies, and they don't really leave. Another thing that you can come up with an explanation on your own for is that our fire alarm goes off all the time in the middle of the night, and our building is literally known for that. They have never caught anyone who may be at fault for this, and I'm pretty certain they've changed their system several times to prevent this from happening. It doesn't work. Finally, possibly the most damning experiences I've had are the children in the hall. Just as it's normal for you to be able to hear your apartment neighbors yelling next door, it's pretty much certain that you're going to hear their kids laughing and running through the halls. The apartment managers often send out notices to please try and contain your kids because they get noise complaints consistently. The problem with this is that I've literally never seen these kids. They run through the halls pretty much every day, and it's been like that for the past 5 years. But whenever I've tried to look for them, I can't see them. My mom is one of those people who try to complain as well, and the first few hundred times it happened, she stepped out to ask the kids to be quieter. But she's never been able to find them. This might just seem like easily explainable things, and I get that. I don't currently have any proof because these things happen either very quickly or gradually over time, but I'll definitely try and get some. I know there are things living here with me, I can feel them. I don't really want to bother them when they're just living peacefully beside me, and have never caused me harm, and I'm very cautious about trying to summon spirits or disturbing them. But I'm open to suggestions. 3. The first house that I've ever lived in, I lived in for 14 years of my life. From birth to 14, I would see a lot of weird things, like some girl crawling out from under my bed. I now only sleep with my box spring and mattress on the floor, or a creepy guy in overalls shhing me when he was sneaking upstairs, or the time we watched The Exorcist and the house phone would be ringing with my grandma's number calling. But when they picked up, it was static and white noise, only to call my grandma back and her explain that she never called in the first place. Or when we talked about moving, we would get scratched, not badly, but enough to know that something didn't want us leaving. We moved to a different house and I lived there for 4 years, so between the ages of 14 to 18. This house was worse. Everyone's health deteriorated, my mom's, mine, and my sister's. I wouldn't sleep much because I'd get woken up at 3 a.m. with some man yelling at me to wake up. When I did sleep, I would have dreams about this heavy-set guy named Mark. He didn't have a face, always wore a suit, and he was heavy-set. This is important, but not till later. He would tell me stories of my brothers when they were younger and my parents, but when I told my parents, they had no idea who I could be talking about. Then there were the shadow people who liked to follow you from room to room. The entire energy of the house was bad, like really bad. So we moved to the next house and lived there for 3 years, 18 to 21. Side note. My sister and I have always shared a room, even when we could have separate rooms. I had noticed during the nights I would wake up and look at our door, and it looked like a woman peering into our room. Except you could only see the outline of her. So I started sleeping facing the wall with my back turned to the door. It didn't creep me out, it just weirded me out, you know? Anyway, my sister was going out with her friend, and while she was getting dressed, she randomly said, "Sometimes I think a woman peers in here at night. That's why I sleep facing away from the door." I went white. I physically felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't tell anyone in my house about it because I thought maybe I was hallucinating. To have someone verify what you've been experiencing without having to bring it up is insane. So naturally, we run down the steps to tell my mom, who was talking to my brother. My mom says she's been seeing it too, and that it felt like Mother checking on us. Then we get into talking about Mark. Heavy set, in a suit, no face. Mark. My brother asked who he was, and I explained that he used to come to me in my dreams and tell me about Mom and Dad and you and our brother. But Mom and Dad don't know Mark apparently, so I don't know. My brother, without hesitation, goes, "You sound like you just described Mark from the trailer park." Before I was born, my parents used to live in a trailer with my 2 brothers and sister when they were younger. My mom then goes, "Yeah, I didn't want to tell her and freak her out." After we moved from that house, we lived in an apartment and then moved back to a house. But I'll tell those experiences some other time. I just think maybe it's not the places that I've lived in that are haunted. Maybe it's just my family. 4. My father's childhood home was an interesting paradox. It was the stuff of nightmares and dreams intertwining, leaving you confused, wondering if you were afraid of it or in love with it. It was eerily beautiful and beautifully eerie at the very same time. Since I could remember, my dad told us every ghost story he had of this house. Some were terrifying, some were curious, some were just plain unexplainable. But one thing stayed true, these ghosts were real. If you took the long way, you'd pass the house on the way to my aunt's. It rested on the corner. Driving slowly, you'd catch every detail from every side of the house. Approaching it, you'd come from behind, gaining a wide view of the small backyard surrounded by a gridiron fence. The exact fence you will see in any movie about a haunted house ever. As you continue driving, you're now looking at the west side of the beautiful Victorian home, standing a proud 3 stories. There is a side where I would see Henry in the 2nd floor window. A quick right and you're at the front of the home, the same fence embracing the entire perimeter of the property. It was certainly a chilling sight to see, but endearing nonetheless. She was straight from a movie. There was never a time we went to Aunt Gail's house without my sister and I begging my mom to go by Daddy's house. She would always appease us, knowing she wanted to too. And every day we'd pass, and I'd see Henry in the window. I suppose that was his room, where he took solace, and watched from his window as cars slowly passed his house. He had to know people were curious about his home being haunted. He had to know cars slowed way down while passing, so they could get a glimpse of something on the property. I wondered if it pissed him off. I wondered if he experienced what my father experienced. I wondered if he was okay with living in a haunted house. Or maybe he wasn't, but had no other choice. I wanted to ask him all the questions I bothered my father with. Another trip to Aunt Gail's meant another trip to Daddy's house. We passed the west side of the house as always. Henry was there as always. This time the current owner was packing boxes into a U-Haul. My mom slows down as always when passing Daddy's house. However, this time she stops. She got the attention of a chipper, curly, red-haired young lady. "Can I help you?" she asked in a very friendly tone. "Friendlier than I'd have been," my mom replied. "This is my husband's old home. Have you ever experienced anything in this house?" The chipper redhead kept her gleaming smile. "Every single night. That's why we're leaving." They had a conversation that I can't remember. But before I knew it, she asked us to come in. I was in shock. I couldn't believe I was going to step foot into my father's haunted house. Years and years of dreaming, and it's really happening. We go in, and man was it beautiful. Big and beautiful and horrifying. I looked forward to meeting the rest of the family. I looked forward to meeting her husband because I already knew him, seeing him nearly every time I passed the house. She introduced us to him, a very large Dan Goodman type of man, much larger than he appeared whenever he stood in the window, and 2 children, 1 boy, 1 girl, about a year older than I. I was 8. I'm sorry, but I can't remember much. I wish I did. I wish I could describe every inch of the house from floor to ceiling, but I can't. I can only remember what it felt like when she took me to the second floor and to the room that faced the west side of the house, and told me that a ghost named Henry sat at the window day in and day out. I remember feeling the color drain out of my face. I remember the feeling I got when I knew the man I've seen in the window all this time was a ghost. I remember the feeling of wishing I had known he was a ghost, but that can't be possible. I know every ghost story about this house, and a ghost named Henry was never mentioned. But she described him, his white shirt, his dark hair and eyes, how he sat straight up watching out the window every day. The strangest thing was, after that day, I never saw him in the window ever again. I'd look, but he wouldn't be there. Precisely that day was the last day I saw Henry. 5. When I was about 5, my mom got pregnant with her second child, and decided to move in with her new husband at his house, closer to town. We had lived with my grandmother beforehand. The new house was really big, and my young self was very excited about having so much space to play in. My bedroom was upstairs and across from my parents' room, and separated by a staircase and a bathroom, and I could see the entrance to all of these places. The bathroom was not functional, so we didn't actually use it, but it had a small door and a drop-down ladder in the ceiling that led to the attic. The attic led directly above my room. We lived in this house until I was maybe 10 or 11. Okay, intro and info over, now for the story. I don't remember exactly when it all started, but I know it was sometime after my baby brother was born. I started hearing things like shuffling and footsteps from the attic above me when I went to bed, and I would always check if it was my parents up there or if the cats got up somehow. But everyone would always be where they should be and asleep. These sounds scared me a lot, so I had a lot of trouble sleeping. I honestly don't remember if I told my parents about it or not, but I know that they didn't do anything about it, at least. I probably didn't. I haven't always been the most open person with my mom or any of her husbands. The footsteps eventually evolved into stomping and shouting, and the shattering of some kind of glass, I assume bottles, which obviously made my sleep even worse. And I remember regularly staying up until the early morning. This sleep deprivation was most likely the cause of a lot of my experiences in the house. And I know that this is going to sound super weird, but I have one very distinct memory of talking to a fish on my wall late at night. Do with that what you want, but yeah, fish. I was like 7 at the time, so whatever, I guess. Now is the point where my memory gets a little cloudy. This was when I turned around 8, I think. I remember having a couple of friends at the house. A little girl and a boy, I think. The boy's name was Oliver, and I don't remember the girl's. I tried to get them to meet my parents a lot, but they didn't like to come inside when anyone was home. Sometimes they did, though, and I would talk to them in my room, and when my mom came to see who I was talking to, she wouldn't see them. I remember getting so angry. Why was she ignoring my best friends? Isn't my mom supposed to at least be nice to them? We also went on walks through the woods together. A lot. I don't remember a lot of events that happened with Oliver and the girl, but I do have one, so I will tell you. My family had a little tire swing in the backyard. My neighbor had 2 little daughters, and the youngest one absolutely loved that swing. Anytime they came over to our house, she would want to play on the swing. One day, the girl's parents came to our house in a panic because they couldn't find their youngest daughter. She wanted us to help her look. Both our families went looking for this little girl, and we searched for a few hours but couldn't find her. It had started to get dark, and the adults were talking about calling the police. But then I spotted Oliver and the girl. They led me around the backyard of our house, and bam, there was the missing girl, on the tire swing. But we had searched the backyard multiple times. Oliver and the girl he was always with then disappeared. I'm actually still very attached to the name Oliver. I think it's because he was my friend. I still feel bad for not remembering the girl's name, but I didn't really spend as much time around her as I did Oliver. I haven't really been comfortable talking about what happened at that house until maybe last year, when my grandma opened up to me about experiencing similar things when she visited the house. I think that these experiences I had when I was very young are the reason why I have so much love for horror and ghosts and the paranormal. I am also able to function pretty well on low sleep. I don't know if that's genetic or a result of experiences, but still a plus. I didn't see Oliver or the girl anymore after we moved out of the house. If you have any questions about my experiences or want to know a bit more, then ask in the comments, and I will try my hardest to respond. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Tea, The Haunted. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I really should make a cup of tea before I start recording these videos. Currently I'm drinking Red Bull. It's like tea for caffeine addicts. I mean, who'd watch a video called Paranormal Bull? You know what, there's probably an audience. Somewhere. And I did want to take this opportunity to send my condolences out to the friends and family of Carrie Temporary. Carrie, I remember from the earlier years of my channel, the first couple of years, was quite active in the comments and on Twitter as well. I hadn't heard anything from her for quite a while, so I was surprised and disheartened when I saw a mention of her in that context. So my thoughts and my love to her friends and family during this time. And with that, I'm gonna head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.